everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of thecinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today we are closing out the year in an extra spooky and dreadful fashion. You could also say it's been a blood-sucking experience. No, we're not talking about recent elections. No, we are not talking about season 2 of The Squid Game, which I'm sure a lot of people are watching. We are talking about something far more terrifying that will haunt our nightmares today. We are reviewing Nosferatu. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not Willem Dafoe. I can't do it as eloquently as him. We're going to start, as we always do, with a couple of different icebreaker questions before jumping into a spoiler-free review of Nosferatu, where we'll also provide a verdict on the film, and then we'll conclude the show with an in-depth spoiler discussion. Joining me today, after a little bit of a break, because he's been doing the making movies thing, he had to sadly miss the War of the Rohirrim review, the trip back to Middle-earth, but he has returned with me, this time perhaps with thanks, my co-host and award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker, Laron. Chapman, welcome back.
So, Caleb, I have to tell you, you came to me in a dream last night, and you were dressed like Orlok. And but when you came, you whispered something in my ear, and it was basically to remind me to do the notes for the podcast for today. So, and I immediately woke up, made a cup of coffee, and did just that. So, apparently, you have reached into my consciousness in ways that I was not expecting. So.
That's so good. My impression's not very good at all. I can't go that deep. No way. Well, Laron, it's a pleasure to have you back. I'm sorry that you have to see me even in your dreams. That's just more obnoxious than anyone deserves, frankly. So, Laron, I told you we're talking about Nosferatu, and I told you we would be joined by a pair of unaged vampires. They just seem to stay the same age as long as I've known both of them. So,
yeah.
I hope you're ready. This might be the last one. It's the last one of the year. It could be the last one where we're mere mortals.
Mere mortals. Well,
first up, he is the co-host of the GoodTrash genre cast. Also, recently initiated member of the Oklahoma Film Critics Circle starting in 2025, co-founder of GoodTrash Media, and I would say one of the most prolific vampire experts I know, Dustin Sells. Dustin, welcome back.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I can't wait to talk about vampires. This is my favorite thing. So this is going to be a good time.
Where did you go to college?
I went to Mid-America Bible College back then. It wasn't a Christian university even then.
Now it's Christian
back
university.
In the day, yeah.
I took a vampire cinema course at OU. God, I forgot the professor's name escapes me, but definitely one of the coolest elective courses in college I've ever taken. So watched a lot of black and white vampire films, wrote a lot of research on them. Definitely not nearly don't know as much as you, but I imagine some of the movies we recommend later will come up.
So I've taught Bram Stoker's Dracula the novel in a couple of Comp 2 courses in the past, and then I teach Brit Lit 2, where I teach as well, so as an English professor. And so always Stoker comes up as one of the required full novels that we read. And so yeah, it's a good time. I'm I'm a big fan of Tomb of Dracula from the Marvel Comics. Okay. Huge fan of that. So good stuff there.
Fun stuff about Dracula is, as we'll probably discuss, he can do a lot with Dracula, it turns out. Almost infinite things, really, as it turns out.
A versatile character.
Mm-hmm. Last but certainly not least, he is the Brockness monster of art direction. He is rejoining us. Let's see, Alien Romulus was the last one, I believe. So we took you from space. Now you're going back in time to a different sort of soul-sucking creature. Brock Lay, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much.
Brock, I need to make a public apology to you.
Why is that?
Well, you called me out. I was a bad friend for a very long time. And I think I just need to out myself. When you and I met, you were all like, hey, Lost Boys is an amazing movie. And I was like, yes. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's fine. And I don't hate the Lost Boys, but I guess whenever I ranked the Lost Boys on Letterboxd, I gave it 1.5 stars.
Yes.
So for years, Brock was under the impression that I loved the movie because when I first met, I was like, oh, that's cool. And I just want to reiterate, I do not dislike the movie. It's just, I don't love it. But then what was it? If 6 months ago, you found my Letterboxd rating and you're like, what? Is our entire friendship a lie? So I just want to own up to the fact that I did not come clean, that I only kind of like the Lost Boys and not love the Lost Boys.
That's where all my street smarts came from, was watching Lost Boys from the age of 2. every 5 times a year up until now.
So I'm sorry I failed you. The dishonesty or lack of integrity there, I need to just I need to air this publicly so everyone knows that Brock loves the movie. I kind of like it, and that I want to be honest with my friends on the show here.
I will no longer deep dive creep on letterboxed accounts of my friends.
Before we get to today's review of Nosferatu, I want to note that if you listen to the show and enjoy the conversation, if you've enjoyed any of the conversations we've had at all this year, this is our last episode of the year, posting on New Year's Eve. We're right on the brink of 2025. If you've enjoyed any of the conversations we've had this year, please head on over to your preferred podcast app and leave us a rating and a review. That'll help us get discovered by more listeners just like you in the new year. So again, quick programming announcement. We will be back next week doing a quick preview of the movies coming out in 2025. We'll then be back the following week to do our top 5 films of 2024. Well, with that said, this is our last episode of the year. So I thought, we're going to do a little more of this next week, but I wanted to just talk about maybe our favorite or maybe most memorable movie-going experience of 2024 first. So just to kick us off, what has been the most memorable movie-going experience you've seen this year? And I want to be very clear. This is not necessarily your favorite movie, though it could be. Rather, the experience you had watching it, whether it was a film that blew you away, whether it was the group you were watching it with, whatever the case may be. So, Laron Chapman, kick us off. What has been your favorite film-going experience of 2024?
This was really hard, so I'm gonna cheat so hard with this one. So my number one, I have a 3-way tie. The number one was seeing Challengers in Dune Part 2 with the likes of you in our core film group.
Aww.
Because
Both
I
were
think
so great.
those are 2 really great movies that came out earlier in the year and were just like a great group experience, so that definitely came to mind. Seeing The Substance, I think it was the second time with my husband Craig, and a packed theater of people, half of them who were there for the ride, half who were not. So
Wow.
that was fun. That was definitely fun because I think a lot of them just came in there to see the new Demi Moore movie because she doesn't make movies that often, and the trailers for that were very mysterious and not at all selling what you're going to see. So that was fun.
Incredible.
And then the last one, I saw the South by Southwest premiere of Sing Sing, and happened to see Clarence Macklin, who plays one of the main characters in the film, who's maybe up for an Oscar this year. And he was one of the real people that the movie is depicting. He's playing a version of himself in it. And so it's
incredible.
So while I was blubbering at the end of that movie, then to have the real life people come out and tell the story was very moving. So those are 3 great film going experiences for me this year.
That is incredible. Sing Sing, I finally caught up with that a couple weeks ago. Loved it. It is not necessarily my top 10, but it's very close. Very, very, very. The performances especially are just incredible. Coleman Domingo, man. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's gonna win, but
he's over. He's on his way.
He's
on his
due
way
for a nomination here at least. And thank you. I'm flattered. I actually also had I had a 2-way tie. I will share my other one in a second. But the Doom Part 2 group watch we had, where we I think Brock, you were there. We had like 25 people. Somehow we got a group that big in one place. It was kind of amazing. Didn't expect it.
We took up like two
rows. And then there was like
easily.
it was really funny. I was talking to Brock about this. We had another like mutual friend that we hadn't seen in a while that also just happened to be in the theater. It was like, oh my gosh, we know everyone in this theater.
Then after the movie, I got the Cliff Notes versions of like the next 5 books from one of your buddies, so that was kind of cool to hear.
Oh yeah,
what comes next in the Dune universe?
Including the
Duneverse,
the Giants Emperor. Oh well, I don't want to spoil it. Okay, yeah. But anyway, yeah, very special moment. Just anytime you can get that people together to watch movies, especially for like an event film like that, where you just have so many people anticipating, and the movie was actually good, thankfully.
Yeah.
Dustin Sells, what is your most memorable film-going experience of 2024?
It's definitely about the company for this one, and because it's a movie that I saw that is a very mainstream movie, which is not my favorite kind of thing, as you guys know about me. It was also a movie presented in 3D, and I'm not a big fan of 3D presentation at all, but it was taking my daughter to her first ever 3D movie where we saw Wicked in 3D for the first time, and she had a ball. I mean, literally, reaching up, grabbing at the screen, all that fun stuff that you expect from a 6-year-old to do, and then she kept checking on me to make sure everyone was going to be all right. It's like, is Alphaba going to be all right? And she was, throughout the whole movie, she was absolutely locked in for a 2.5-hour film with a 6-year-old, very active young lady, and she had an absolute blast, and her joy was my joy.
That's good.
And
I love that.
Yeah, it was a really, really great time. And so, yeah, I had more fun watching Wicked with her than I did anything else all year long.
That's good.
I
Very
love to
sweet.
hear that. My first question is Elphaba going to be okay? Does she understand does she understand where the story is going?
She's seen, yeah, she's.
Oh,
Yeah, she's.
dude, that's gonna be like whenever part 2 comes out, she's gonna be like the Star Wars, like Empire Strikes Back or something.
Yeah,
Where you're like, you know.
I've already made her watch the Neverending Story. She's seen Artax die, so you know. I mean,
Just get the deaths out the way.
I'm ready to
Mufasa-
traumatize her.
Mufasa, all those, just get them all out the way.
They all die.
Mhm.
Oh man, I love that. See that it makes a world of difference. I mean, even movies like maybe they're your favorite, maybe they're not your favorite. Just like it's not a top, but I was in contention. I went and saw a Complete Unknown a second time with Lauren's family this on Christmas Day. Massive Bob Dylan fans. Short version though. I liked it a lot. I enjoyed the movie because of the experience, because of the company way more. So I think that, to your point, Dustin, great company makes a movie.
it.
Yeah. Broccoli, what is your favorite experience of 2024?
I have two. My first one is a terrible movie, but the experience was with my son, so it was a great time. I told my son Pilot that he had a doctor's appointment, so I went and checked him out of school, but then we went and saw Godzilla vs. Kong, the new Empire. He's a huge Godzilla fan, so he was out of his mind for that, and then we watched the movie, and I think I might have fallen asleep during one part. It was so bad. It was not a Jurassic World Dominion moment where the experience with my kid made the movie better. The movie was too bad. And the second one was with Abigail. Seeing Abigail, it would have been probably better having not known that she was a vampire.
Yeah.
They would have kind of, if they would have from dusk to dawned it and just kind of made it like a heist movie or a kidnapping movie. But at the end, spoiler alert, when that person exploded and blood went everywhere, that was a very fun moment because we had a packed theater and everybody cracked up and screamed and had that really fun kind of reaction to something that was unexpected. So that was a fun moment for me.
Oh, that's great. I'm with you, man. The movie's not great, but it is so much stinking fun.
It is,
It's
yeah.
just
It's a
an
blast.
absolute blast. Yeah.
Common thread between both those movies, Dan Stevens.
Yes,
Had a good moment.
Me and Dan Stevens hung out quite a bit this year. So.
And he was so much fun in both of those movies. Even Godzilla X Kong wasn't my favorite, but he was having I had fun when he was clearly having fun.
And
Yeah.
those are fucking onions will forever live on.
Yeah.
I think the common thread is definitely the company and the memories. I do have to say, Ty, so a little cheat here. I have to say the Megalopolis advanced screening.
Oh my word.
Dustin, were you in that, right?
I was in that. Yes.
Okay, so context, and listeners who didn't listen to our Megalopolis review, it was crazy because it brought like so many different people I know in different spheres of Oklahoma film culture, filmmakers, film bros, theater managers, critics. It was like, in the Warren IMAX, I was like, I feel like the who's who of film nerds in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
We're all right here, right now.
It was part of a very elite group, but not just for our state. But
I mean, Sunrise was in there,
Yeah,
like Dead
yeah.
Center people. It was like,
I mean, even because only a few select people got to see that specific interview that he did.
Yes.
And I'll let you tell the story, but yeah.
well, okay, there's it's so, especially after the election, that interview hits a little differently, but
does,
it is the most off the rails Q&A I have ever heard. I'm trying to give the super short version. Number one, there's a Q&A before the movie, not after, which is kind of weird, but okay, with Francis Ford Coppola, and then these two other schmucks who are just panelists, what are their names? Robert De Niro and Spike Lee, panelists.
Panelists was what they said on their names. We're like, is that all they are?
And then
Cool.
the moderator, who I understand is actually a very quite smart, capable, eloquent
seen him do other
person,
things.
really good. Clearly, I mean, I get it. He's interviewing the goats of a generation, but he's
floundered.
clearly very nervous. And Francis Ford Coppola is clearly not giving a shit and just railroading him at every point. And then it spins off into politics. And this is like 30 minutes into the panel. And at one point, I mean, there was just so many moments within that interview that were just hysterical.
So little was said about the film. That's what was funny, because they both were trying to like, well, they haven't seen it, so we don't know what to say or talk about. But so yeah, it was
Okay, top three moments of the interview is number one, Bob, how did you and Francis meet? Francis Ford Coppola rips off the mic and just goes on for 20 minutes, and he's like, yeah, Bob, how did we meet? After talking for like 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Yeah.
The second is when the moderator's like, so Spike, you've seen an hour of the movie. What'd you think? And then Spike Lee does everything he can to not answer the question. He's like, I mean, we're all going to see it, so I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
And then number 3 is, and then all of a sudden at some point, Robert De Niro just started going off about Trump, which then derailed it.
Which he does. Any chance he can.
And, feel how you will about Trump, but it's quite humorous because it's like old man yelling at the clouds.
Yes.
Anyway, most off the rails Q&A ever, followed by
The movie,
which is
Also off the rails.
Unforgettable experience.
Well, Overture even was incredibly terrible. It was mixed bad, and so it was peaking out. So it was already kind of a loud, kind of operatic overture.
Going in and out. Yeah.
Well, because I think they were just streaming it, and it just kept looping. So the sound levels were. I thought my eardrums were going to burst.
It was awful,
terrible.
And then the random that was not explained, but remember the person that comes.
Oh my gosh!
The person that comes in
to ask a question or something in the movie
to the screen.
Yeah, to the screen, and they do like a little ditty or whatever, and it's very like I'm so confused by what was happening.
Their microphone didn't work, isn't that what happened?
I think that's what happened. Yeah. But he was down there
because we were all the lights come up a little bit, and there's a guy in the front, and everyone's like looking down.
Shrinks, and there's a little man down there, and I was like, "What is going? Is there something wrong with the projection?" But that apparently happened all over the world, wherever these were happening. So it was like, okay, well.
Truly an unforgettable.
Yes.
I will on my deathbed. I'm thinking favorite film going experience or most memorable film going experience, at least that for sure.
It's wild.
Well, guys, it's been fun. Listeners, what is your favorite film going experience of the year? We're going to have another episode where we talk about more recaps from this 2024 next week. Hit us up at thecinematropolis@gmail.com or hit us up also on Facebook at facebook.com/thecinematropolis or on Instagram at thecinematrop. Let's get to our other icebreaker question, way more on topic for the film of the day, Nosferatu. So the question I'm going to ask you, gentlemen, what folklore character or story would you like to see either adapted or even remade for the big screen today? Give, as best you can, I would say name a story, a director, even a potential story pitch or actor. Do your best. I mean, because you can go as big as small as you want. So, for example, Rip Van Winkle, directed by Christopher Borgil, who was the one who directed Dream Scenario, starring Jeff Bridges as Rip Van Winkle, for example. Dustin Sells, I will throw it to you first. What is your pick here?
Okay, you're going to have to really go with me here because I think it's kind of wild, but I think it would totally work. The character is from American folklore. John Chapman, this incredibly crazy, tilted Quaker man who goes off on a mission to plant apple trees. I'm talking about Johnny Appleseed.
Yes.
With tin pan on his head. Real life guy, played by Willem Dafoe. And I want to see Terry Malick directed. I mean, honestly, like this sort of reflective, like ecocentric, environmental kind of film coming from Malick with his sort of philosophical purview, going into that sort of Quakerism that sort of informs a lot of Chapman's behavior and whatnot. I really think there's a good movie in there, not just like the silly Disney Tall Tales version of Johnny Appleseed with a pot on his head kind of thing there. But Dafoe, I think, seems to me the best image for this somewhat tilted, but also he sees further than we do kind of person. And so, yeah.
Dafoe is such an interesting actor who feels like he could be in any time frame. He could be in like the distant past, in the future, like futuristic kind of things, or it could be an everyday kind of man.
Yeah.
He's just very like malleable to so many different spaces of
he does. Yeah, he does. He's a good face that sort of works. Yeah, I agree with that entirely.
I definitely see the Terrence Malick lends itself to the Johnny Appleseed, especially with the environmental angle. You kind of edit it sort of like like a Tree of Life or Days of Heaven sort of thing. So you kind of like get a lot of really powerful imagery and moods, but then that's sort of like grounded by a performance. Ah, man, I love it. Hey, Dustin, I hope Terrence Malick makes that movie.
Hollywood, hire me. I'll be a producer.
All right, that is an excellent selection. Brock Lay, what did you pick today?
I was going to pick like Pecos Bill or one of the other tall tale people, so I thought that would be fun. But I went with the, however you pronounce it, there's many iterations, like Wendigo. Yeah. I thought of that and thought of like kind of a piece like with Native Americans and cowboys, like going back like a little bit further. That way there's a little bit more, I don't know, nuance to the story instead of like a new age thing. And I would want, of course, Kurt Russell starring, just with him being in Hateful Eight and then Bone Tomahawk. Like he just embodies that kind of just, I don't know, really cool presence he has on screen and just his look and everything. And he's one of my favorite actors. I would probably pick S. Craig Zoller to direct.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I just feel like he
super gory
and brings a lot. I don't need it to necessarily be gory. I was choosing between him and Flanagan, just because I love Flanagan, but I just want something that is actually scary and uses practical effects and doesn't rely on CGI.
Great choice, Brock Lay. Laron Chapman, what did you pick?
So I went with the Deer Woman, which is an
Yes.
if for those who don't know, an animal spirit that appears throughout Native American art and mythology, is often depicted kind of as a hybrid of those two things. And she's known to seduce promiscuous men and leave them to die or waste away from longing. I thought that Lily Gladstone would be a really great person to play this. And then I was thinking maybe Terry Gilliam as the director for this. So, yeah.
Okay. Terry Gilliam, man. He hasn't been in action since
A long. I mean,
he's great.
In his prime.
Oh yeah. Was the last movie he did the man who killed Don Quixote? Was that the last one he did?
Maybe. Yeah. And then there's one he did. God, man, it was probably in the early 2000s. There's lots of gaps in his filmography.
He's great. I love
sure.
anything he does.
Yeah.
At least it's interesting. That's a great pick. And that's also like a folklore that I don't think has been adapted to the big screen.
Not that I'm aware.
There's a Masters of Horror where someone takes a swipe at a deer lady, and it's not very good. So it'd be nice to see someone really sort of give it its due, because I grew up in West Oklahoma as well, and so hearing that story, I'd love to see that. That's great.
Okay, I'm in. So I got 3 different ones. I'll keep it short though. First one, The Headless Horseman, directed by Jennifer Kent, and I want it to be sort of like a somewhat political drama about how the British people sort of
Jennifer Kent did
the Babadook,
and then there was one other one, right? Like the Nightingale,
which was a tough watch. She also did one of the episodes of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities.
Okay.
She did one episode that was really good. She's really, really good at the mood pieces, but also has a strength for character writing, I found, for the most part. At least that's my take on it. Okay. So I feel like if you make it more of a character drama based with politics, that would set this guy up to get killed by the Headless Horseman, sort of way. Yeah. Secondly, I want to do another Davy Jones riff. No, not Pirates of the Caribbean, Davy Jones. I want it to be spooky, scary. It's the ghosts of the sea haunting people, and I want it to be written and directed by Mike Flanagan, because I just want some sailors monologuing on a boat somewhere as this like creepy, like old ship comes out of the mist.
I would totally dig that.
By Neptune's beard.
Yeah. Folklore. So much more to talk about there. Without further ado, let's get into our review of this piece of folklore. It is Robert Eggers' remake of Nosferatu.
I have never shared my secret with any soul.
You've had these spells since childhood. Tell me what you can from the beginning.
It is like a dream. It was our wedding. When we turned around, everyone was dead. The stench of their bodies was horrible. Standing before me was death. But I had never been so happy.
According to IMDb, Nosferatu is a gothic tale of obsession between a haunting young woman and the terrifying vampire infatuated with her, causing untold horror in its wake. So, a few different facts about Nosferatu. Just for those of you who are not super familiar with the history, Nosferatu is actually a remake of the 1922 silent German expressionist film. For those who are not familiar with the history of that movie, it is actually an unauthorized, unofficial adaptation of Bram Stoker's 1897 novel Dracula. This particular remake was announced to be in development in 2015 with Robert Eggers attached. This has apparently been like his passion project that he's really wanted to make. Here's an interesting thing that I thought was fun, because he at one point had it lined up to be his next film after The Witch, which was a huge success for him critically, at least. He was like, I'm not ready to make this movie yet. So he goes on to make The Lighthouse and The Northman first. So I just feel that's pretty impressive. A lot of people wouldn't do that. They would say, I have the momentum. Let's go make this dream project. And he's like, if I want to do it, I want to do it right, which means I need to get better at making movies. Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. Nosferatu stars Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok, Nicholas Hoult as Thomas Hutter, Lilia Rose Depp as Ellen Hutter, Aaron Taylor Johnson as Friedrich Harding, and Willem Dafoe as Professor Albin Eberhard von Franz.
What a great name.
Incredible. Very fitting. The film was budgeted at $50 million. It opened at $11.55 million domestically on Christmas Day. That was number 3 behind Mufasa, The Lion King, and Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And actually, the numbers just came in this morning that it's made over $40 million to the 5-day Christmas timeframe, which is great for a movie like this to be released at Christmas. Smart counter programming.
Not exactly Christmas family viewing.
No. But it brought everyone who didn't want to see Bob Dylan or some animated stuff on the screen. So anyway, it's looking promising that this movie is going to make its budget plus some extra back, which is great news for Robert Eggers fans because I don't know about you guys. We'll talk about this movie. I just want to see this dude keep making movies.
Yeah.
Real quick, because listeners, we brought some very passionate vampire fans to the table today. Various types of fans have varying degrees of experience. So I thought it might be good for all of us to just talk about our familiarity with the original film. And you can also perhaps provide some context on Dracula as well, since it's related. So Laron, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm overly familiar with it because it was required viewing in film school. So, and I mentioned, I think off the podcast that I took a vampire cinema course in college, and this was the first film that we watched. So it's extremely influential, and you can kind of see that throughout every iteration of any vampire text that you've seen in film. And so, yeah, I've probably seen it. I mean, if I'm just throwing a ballpark number out there, probably like 20, 25 times. So,
wow, 25
yeah,
times.
So, and they actually played it here at the Rodeo Cinema with an orchestra, which was very fun. So
Cool.
I was one of 5 people in there, and I'm like, man, you guys are missing out. It was a blast. So
Super cool. I had a friend who hooked me with some tickets. There was a live orchestra down at the OSU with their orchestra. I think it was like 2 years ago around Halloween season. Incredible. Like I'd seen it before, but never with a live orchestra. So listeners, if you have a chance to see it with that component, do yourself a favor and check it out.
Yeah.
Dustin Sells, how about you? What's your relationship with Nosferatu?
So the 22 version, I'm with like Laron. I've seen it, a couple dozen, maybe 3 dozen times. I mean, it's quite a few times that I've seen the movie, and I've taught it a few times in sort of collaboration with teaching the novel in literature kind of courses. I've also used it in a film studies course. We get to that German Expressionism section there, and it's sort of a great example of that particular style. So Murnau is one of the better known directors who deploy that heavy chiaroscuro and that real moody kind of the environment expresses. I mean, that's what German Expressionism is, right? The environment expresses the feelings of the characters, and I find it more accessible than Caligari. People like Caligari a lot, and I think it's more hyper stylized. But this movie tends to, because of its familiarity, students kind of sit back and start paying attention to the imagery of it quite a bit, and so I tend to prefer using it for that purpose. And so, yeah, I've seen it a bunch of times. It's a miracle that we have it. I mean, this is sort of the fun thing, about it. Florence Stoker's still alive in 1922, and she's running this lawsuit against Murnau and Pabst and all these other folks out there in Germany. And I mean, most of the copies of the movie were turned into ladies' high heel shoes, and it's only just by some miraculous saving of some prints in Argentina and some other places that we even have it. So I try to get as many people to see it as I possibly can.
I mean, it's a super important piece of film history too. It's got to be among the most popular silent films of all time, if not the most popular.
I mean, SpongeBob, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, man. So it continues. Brock Lay, what is your familiarity with the original Nosferatu?
This is where the street smarts come in. I always just kind of stuck to Lost Boys from Dusk to Dawn, and having seen this with you the other night, the next day I was like, okay, I really need to understand this a little bit better. So I did watch the original 1922 version, and it was incredible, and it really made me like the most recent one so much more, to the like a couple letter grades more. It's kind of weird, like how much it made me like the story and everything about what Eggers did with it. In watching that 1922 version, there's just things about it that are just really cool that kind of amp up the creepiness, but they had to do with just the editing technologies that they had back then, just like the quick cuts of some things. And it just kind of adds, like you said, just to that environment and just like the mood to it. So, just recently got into it, but it made, I loved it. It was great.
But enhanced your appreciation for the new one.
Oh, leaps and bounds.
Oh man, that's cool. So I've seen the silent film Nosferatu. I don't know, definitely not as much as you guys, probably like 5 or 6 times, or at least bits and pieces of it. I've probably watched it start to finish like 3 or 4 times. It's super great. I love it because it's one of those early films silent films I watched in terms of like, okay, I think silent films just suck because there's no sound. So why bother? But whenever you're able to see I know, Dustin. This is like high school me.
I draw swords now.
No.
Dustin
I don't think that
stood up and flexed at Caleb like he was going to hit
This is
him.
when I saw it the first time. Sorry to be clear. This is like
I will cut you.
probably 20 years ago. But but it's like, oh, why would I like silent films? You check it out. It's like, well, the lack of sound. It really was great at sort of like emphasizing that the lack of sound means that there has to be very impressive visual elements to communicate and tell the story. And I think it does it remarkably well. Just like little things like when he leans up out of the coffin, the way they use shadows in that original movie. And there's also just some stuff that's really funny. It's creepy, but also has a sense of humor. And again, very, very distinct visual aesthetic. And like I said, if watching it with a live orchestra just really helps you get like immersed in the world that they're creating. So, it's one that I really think should be required viewing for anyone who has any interest in film history, just because it's also not very long. It's easy watch. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of cool history there. So yeah, I do like the original film. I only recently have enjoyed, because of this movie, frankly, a lot of the discourse around comparing all the different versions of Nosferatu and Dracula, sort of seeing how Nosferatu makes some certain adaptation choices to Dracula, but it's not Dracula, it's Nosferatu.
Right.
There's some fun tension that's had there that I think we could see in this movie. So seeing those dotted lines kind of like connect is also, I don't know. It's fun. It's fun to see the differences, the similarities, and how certain directors made choices to sort of try to avoid the copyright and failed. But well, that said, what did we think of the new Nosferatu film? And Dustin Sells, I'll start with you.
Oh man, it for me. So I really, really had a good time with it because I am sort of a lifelong fan of all kinds of vampire fiction, and and then really, truly, all the way from Lost Boys to the Anne Rice stuff. I really just enjoy these particular kinds of characters because I find them. Vampires to be really sort of useful, like ongoing metaphors. Derrida talks about the sort of spiral of interpretation that a thing might mean a thing when it first comes around. And so Stoker might have particular thematic concerns when he writes the novel, but then when it gets adapted by Murnau, it means, pestilence, and it sort of also anticipates some of the rise of fascism that's going on in Eastern Europe. By the time it gets to Lugosi, it becomes this sort of Lothario kind of predacious kind of sexuality of a man. By the time it's the 80s, it's the AIDS crisis. By the time it's in the 2000s, it's terrorism, and the ways in which it's those kinds of stories just have this durability built into them. And so I am coming in with bias, and I recognize that, and I know this about myself. However, the movie, it goes so hard, guys. It just goes so hard, and it does something that is unique in the way of telling the story that's very different than what you might see in, say, Werner Herzog's Nosferatu, the Vampire, which is really sort of dreamy, kind of surreal. And the best parts of that movie, the parts where nobody's talking, it's all the in-between bits that really sort of make that particular film work. Or even like Shadow of the Vampire with Willem Dafoe playing Max Schreck playing Count Orlok, who's actually really a which is hilarious, but also, amazing. Do we really need the screenwriter? Which is just a great question to ask. And so, but the movie, the way it's able to sort of visually register itself within a frame of art, the sort of candlelit scenes within the very, very Barry Lyndon kind of cinematography there. There's a real painterly kind of approach to it. There's a moment where I always want to call him Harker instead of Hutter, but when Hutter is making his way to Orlok's castle, and he's sort of peering over this waterfall, and it's the Wanderer painting from the 19th or the 18th century, and so it's just visually really, really brilliant. I really like the score as well, and the performances are all very, very solid. The one thing I don't care for is Aaron Taylor-John's, whatever his name is. He
stood out to me as
cell phone face. Is a thing that I don't like to say, but when you were talking about Defoe's malleability, like he lacks it. Yeah,
he's the one thing that was not is grounded into the world as lived in for me as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we need that character. We need that sort of science
Yeah.
person, that rational person to sort of resist that gothic, irrational thing. But so you need that character, but I don't care for his casting or performance.
So his
in
cell
that.
phone face where he's always trying to look stoic or handsome or
Mhm.
The voice was okay, like the accent was fine, but it was just the way he emotes is not. It works in The Fall Guy, doesn't work.
I don't know, man.
Well, cell phone face also means like he looks too modern. He looks like
Okay,
he's
gotcha.
a
Got it.
contemporary kind of
Okay.
person. Yeah.
I get that a little bit. The mustache on him looks a little weird. That said, maybe it was because I also just saw Kraven the Hunter, where it's just very bad. I was like, oh, he's so much better in this movie.
Yeah.
That's not to be fair though. That's not to disqualify your point at all. But I was like, I don't know. It is definitely on a different wavelength than everyone else.
I
I'd
think
agree.
he's fine.
Yeah.
It's more so that everyone
Yeah.
is so good.
Yeah.
And he's just okay.
And he's just kind of, yeah, it's the one thing I was like, every time he's on screen, I'm out a little bit, just like a couple degrees, you know. So.
Mhm.
All right, that's fair. More than Willem Dafoe though. I mean, I love Willem Dafoe in this movie.
Willem
I love
Dafoe is
Will- I love
incredible.
No, he's incredible.
Well, that's another one of the references.
He's going so hard in this movie. It's incredible. I love it.
There's a top hat, somewhat smiling, dancing moment that is from The Man Who Laughs from another F.W. Murnau film. And so, again, that sort of just that visual fluency that Eggers seems to have throughout the film is part of the joys of it. And then Defoe's performance itself is, the right kind of tilted.
I think he actually almost caught himself on fire. I'm convinced he was the one who was doing all that. Because they used real rats. I was watching him make him all the thousands of rats.
I was like, I'm out. Couldn't have done it.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I read that in the 79 version, so did Werner Herzog. He used real rats, but he didn't like that they were white or something, so he dyed them or boiled them to a point where they would have like a color to them, and like half of them died.
Oh my gosh.
and then the rest of them, they were licking the dye off the other one. So like it ended up being like a huge amount of money just wasted on the film.
There are two truly insane people at the center of that movie, and they're Werner Herzog and Klaus Kinski. I mean, they are absolutely just bananas human beings, and it's crazy that movie ever even happened.
So Dustin Sells, very pro this
I like
movie.
it a lot.
Broccoli, what did you think of Nosferatu?
I don't even know if I can compare to what Dustin just said. That was beautiful. So many things. I loved it. It was great. And though it's funny, I didn't like it at first. I was like, it was okay. It was my least favorite.
When I was sitting
Eggers.
when we went into the movie, Brock was like, I was like, this movie fucking rules. And Brock, you're like, it's all right.
And it was. And I was like, it is meh. And then I watched the 1922 version, and I was like, okay, like I got it a lot more. Eggers really paid tribute to the original one. He did a really good job, and I was thinking my street smart brain was triggering. I was like, I wanted more from this, but it's not that. It's what he did with it, and he was respectful about it and went about it in a really good way, and it was a beautiful film, and it was very good. It was not scary. I don't think it's a horror film.
It's gothic horror
So,
tale.
yeah. People are like, it's my favorite horror film. Like, no, it's like I can see it as like a favorite film or something, but it was so much more than that, and that's something that I think Eggers brings to everything he makes, and I'm glad he waited. Because, like you said, nobody would show that restraint. They would jump on that. They were like, I might never get another opportunity. This is my moment. But he waited for it because he knew
And he might not have had the resources, too, to make it as
Yeah.
beautiful as he made it. Yeah.
trusted his talent and knew that he could get there and that he could make something like this. And then, of course, Willem Dafoe was just, there was moments where you're in awe of him. You're kind of giggling at him for his delivery of certain lines that are like kind of just outlandish, but like still like just grounded in performance. I mean, thankfully, thank you 1922 Nosferatu for making me see the light.
Yeah, it's definitely, I can see coming in, like, that was what I was saying to you after we watched it. I was like, it's sort of a vibes thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's about the vibes. It's about the feeling of living in this place with this creature that's just sort of all consuming the world and these people's lives. And it's not really about, like, jump scares or anything like that. It's, it's more about, like, trying to, again, bring you into this place and understand exactly what is evil in the context of this story. What does that look like? It looks like a plague ship of rats. They're killing everyone.
Yeah. That's what's great about good movies is they make you seek things out. Like, instead of just saying, oh, I didn't like that, or, oh, I love that, it makes you like want to go back and explore, films that were, groundbreaking at their time that you've never seen, or research certain things about the time period as to why that happened. And then that like you gain a little bit of knowledge, and then you can see why they do certain things. And that really just opens up your eyes to good cinema, good films, because it makes you that much just a little bit smarter about certain things or films. And I think that's what a good movie should do.
Ah, love to hear that. So Brock coming in pretty hot on the movie as well. Laron, Chapman, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think speaking of vibes, the first thing that struck me is just the look and the atmosphere of this film. It's just this like the stark monochromatic like blues and grays, just really rich. I'm sorry. And I felt like Lily Rose Depp is someone I've not really paid a lot of attention to. I know she had a show on HBO. Was it The Idol or something?
The Idol,
like that?
yeah.
Didn't watch it, but she is such a powerhouse in this. I felt like she really anchers this.
Just to go really hard.
Really hard. Her physicality in this is incredible, and so I thought she was really great. I thought, obviously, we've already mentioned Willem Dafoe, but Bill Skarsgård, man, I mean, I guess he's just going to play he's like one of the best character actors of his generation. I feel like he's played Pennywise. He's played these different, like he's unrecognizable in this. And like we say that sometimes kind of hyperbolically. And I feel like, but genuinely, even the close-ups of him, like I can't see him.
Doesn't look like Bill Skarsgård.
I can't see him in it at all. And then the voice, obviously, and on top of that, just definitely just like he's a character. He's just this ominous creature. But yeah, I found this to be, I mean, I think Eggers is just becoming one of the great folklore horror, filmmakers. And I just love that he has such a reverence for, the history of this genre, in particular, and then just how detailed his films are. So no, I was a huge fan of it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys have said it all so well. Again, the being in the place and the atmosphere, the time with these characters, I just want to call out, I think it's been mentioned here before already, but when we talk about the colors, the lighting, Dustin, you were talking about the scene with, there are times, I'm not sure whether it was lit by candles or not. Like, I mean, there's candles on the set. I questioned whether or not they had actual lighting outside of the candles. That's how good and like cozy. You're like, oh my gosh, this is like, it looks like a real candle. It doesn't look like blown out. It's and that's like within like that, when you're in the castle or the house, but then also just the way they use shadows throughout the movie is just incredible. I mean, the opening shot, it's like a face slowly emerging from darkness, and just how precise everything is lit. It just is such top-notch craft, man. I just don't think I've seen, I mean, I'm all about atmosphere. There's a lot of great directors out there, but I think few people have done it as well as Robert Eggers does it with Nosferatu.
I mean, every movie was basically void of, electricity damn near, like with The Witch, The Northman, and all of them are just totally kind of different in like the feel of it and the look of it, and all of them
He teleports you to a place, right? Yeah, a place with a very specific type of like energy and setting, and that you're supposed to feel, and he just does it like no one else. I have to say, this is not a critique for me because I thought Bill Skarsgård was great. I am seeing a lot of and I'm not like calling. I'm saying I've heard this from multiple people. I'd be curious if you guys have heard this too. A lot of people are really out on the mustache is like ruining the movie for them.
Yeah,
save that for the spoiler section.
He's got a mustache. Okay, Vlad the Impaler had a mustache. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I wasn't even really averse to it when we watched it. I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense for the time period where they live. Even then I was like, okay, that's a choice. And then I read even like in the original novel,
he's got
Dracula
a
has
mustache. Yeah.
So
it's a weird thing to be hung up on.
I mean, the only other mustache Dracula that I know of is in the Jess Franco directed film with Christopher Lee. So Christopher Lee does a Dracula outside of Hammer with Franco.
Yeah.
And that's the only other one I know of. That and the one in the Tomb of Dracula, he's got a little pencil mustache.
And then
I guess it's uncommon. So it's
is it actually the mustache ruins it, or is it people just feel like it's weird that it's on Dracula / Nosferatu? I'm just curious because I mean, yes, it is a very large mustache, but I just was like, oh, it's part of the period he's going for.
Is it like you have a Dracula, then their teeth aren't well, I've heard people have issues with like. So you have the fangs, like just the like, and then you have like all teeth are sharp versus just the two. I don't know. I hear people have issues with that too.
Because they're not the incisor fangs from the Nosferatu 22, and I guess
because like Abigail, for example, they're all sharp. Like so it's just like some people have aversions to the way the teeth are shaped. I don't know.
Again, I'm not listen. I'm not going to tell people how to feel about it, but I was.
I am.
When someone the first time someone told me that, I was like, okay, dude, get over yourself. But then I've heard like multiple people say it, and I'm like,
don't care for it.
And I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah, it's a lot of the reviews on Letterboxd have mentioned the mustache. They're like 4.5 stars, the half star because what's with that mustache?
And he had to know, but and that's what's weird. It's like you have to know that's going to be a sticking point because it does stand out, and it's like
it is a choice.
Is it worth it to do this? And like he must have just felt really strongly about it. Eggers.
Yeah. It's definitely I mean, like watching it, you're like, it's very distinct. He definitely made a choice, but I don't think it was a bad one. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I just want to call that out because that of all the things people have criticized about this movie, that's been the most common one. And I wonder what you guys thought. Yeah. All right. Well, real quick before we get to letter grades, so much Dracula stuff out there. We're going to talk about this, frankly, a lot more in depth in the spoiler section. But I just wanted to, talk a little bit about spoiler free how this compares to other versions of the story, so that before people watch it, they can sort of set expectations for what they're getting into. I mean, there's so many different adaptations of Dracula. I mean, Dustin's already mentioned several. I mean, you could even look at like pulpy versions like Dracula 3000, or whatever. Yeah. That movie's terrible. So I don't know, Laron, how would you compare this to other versions of Dracula that you've seen?
I think it's certainly the grisliest one I've seen, and also the horniest one that I've seen. I mean, there's definitely a layer of sexuality that seems very front and center in this one that I haven't seen as much in others. And I think that it's also very primal and visceral. And I think it's slightly less psychological than some of the other ones. I feel like this one's a lot more physical than we get a lot more of him. That he's not just this thing in the shadows so much. We get a lot of dialogue from this character, and
like a surprising amount of dialogue,
a surprising amount of text coming out of that. And I found that very different, but not necessarily unwelcome. Just something that, because normally he's just an ominous figure that's kind of in the shadows. He's not speaking. He just kind of has a presence, and he still has a presence. But here he actually has a perspective that we're hearing as well. So I thought that was interesting. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good call out. Brock, how would you compare this to the different versions of Dracula you've seen before?
First of all, how dare you say this is the horniest version? Did you not see Gary Oldman as a werewolf caressing Sadie Frost?
Fair enough.
That is a pretty horny version.
That was the horniest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Now there's some Andy Warhol ones that are pretty wild too with Udo Kier. Yeah.
I mean, I think it follows the 1922 version. It follows it pretty close. Kind of the same with the Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula of 92, kind of just Gary Oldman just thinking that Winona Ryder, is this his lost love and just being obsessed with her and trying to be with her. No, I mean, it follows everything pretty good. I think that's what I didn't realize. Again, I keep going back to this. That's just what I didn't realize upon viewing it the first time, was how close it was framed to the original one. Mm-hmm. And so whenever it was like kind of ending, I was like, I could have used more, but then I watched it and I was like, no, it was perfect. It was what it was. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, so kind of following the model, the blueprint set by the original. Yeah. Dustin, how would you compare it to some of the variations of Dracula you've seen?
Well, I think it's nice to see a move away from the romantic vampire. And again, I'm a fan of the romantic vampire. I am delighted by a 35 millimeter film strip of Brad Pitt from Interview with the Vampire that I was given as a Christmas gift by Laron. And but that being said, there's just, again, the variety, and one of the things that sort of gets lost, and the Max Schreck performance in the 1922 Dracula is pestilence. He is disease, and in this sense, he brings pestilence and disease. But there's something like truly sort of demonic about this kind of Dracula, that he really is a force of evil, something eldritch that he's bringing, from ancient times past. I mean, clearly, the use of the mustache and the sort of Vlad Tepes kind of stuff that's sort of being referenced there with that particular sort of iconic look that he has sort of grounds him in time, but we don't get any backstory or any history. And there's no reason really to believe that, this is just, this dude got bit at some point and turned into this thing, that there's something even further back, something even eviler, that this human being that's now a corpse that is being possessed by the spirit of evil is part of something that's really ancient and truly destructive to all forces of light and good and humanity in the world. And I love that. I think that's fun. It's just, it's another way to sort of think about about this kind of character again. And so for me, it's bringing some stuff back and just going harder at some of the same kind of ideas that we see in like Shrek's, Max Shrek's version of it from Murnau.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I think that was my big take here was that we're sort of moving away from the sort of like poppy version of the the very like palpable, oh, it's fun to watch or easy to watch, eye candy, seductive. Now this is taking it back to like the roots of this is a mythical creature that is terrifying, is disgusting. You can see like he is literally, like you said, a walking corpse possessed by evil. Mm-hmm. Even looking at him, you're just like, oof, it's icky, you know.
And there's nothing wrong with that romantic, sexy vampire, that Bela Lugosi or whatever. That's fun too. I mean, even a sparkly vampire is fine by me, which is probably going to get me in some trouble in this room.
No. I mean, not preferable, but I mean, like, vampires in pop culture totally welcome. It seems like we've for quite a while have moved away from this. Like, this is an ancient evil thing that is not really of good, at the root of it. So yes, he is seductive in this movie in a weird sort of way, but just not the way in a sexy way.
The way he drinks blood.
Oh yeah, out of the chest.
Out of the chest.
Almost like he inhales.
And he's like inhaling and in some case thrusting maybe a little bit. It was very like just again very primal and very visceral. So yeah, that was very jarring the first time that was happening for sure.
And
Dustin, it's sexual but not erotic.
Exactly.
When you touched on it, just and Caleb did too, the evilness, and I think when because this isn't spoilers, there was a moment where it was being said that I think he was like a sorcerer or like some type of a wizard, and I've read too that like when he died, he was so evil that like the devil like wanted him back on Earth because of the death and evil that he brought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, it kind of goes back to that, like the roots, like again of the ancient evil. Like incarnate sort of thing. I don't know. It's pretty cool. We haven't gotten as much of that for sure, in quite a while. So I appreciated that. They go, and like you said, Dustin, they go so much harder even than I expected. All right, we'll talk more about that in spoilers. But first, letter grade reviews. I'll start with you, Brock Lay. What letter grade would you give Nosferatu?
I'm gonna give it an A.
Ooh,
I really want to watch it again and make up for what I did to myself the first time through, which was what is it, the DJ Khaled quote, like, congratulations, you played yourself. I did. So I want to go back with the knowledge of the original film and watch it again and just appreciate it that much more.
Awesome. Yeah, love to hear that. Dustin, what letter grade would you give it?
I would grade it like I would papers that I grade, actually. So if you do all the things right the way you're supposed to do them, you get the A. If you surprise me, you get the plus. And it surprised me, so I'll give it the plus.
Ooh, A plus. We don't get those on the show very often.
I've never heard an A plus.
Yeah. I mean, we like movies a lot, but A plus. I love to hear that. A plus from Dustin. Laron, Chapman, what's your letter grade?
I'm giving it an A minus. I think there's just such a mastery of craft on display here. And the world building is very gothic and textured. And I think the screenplay for me is a little bit obvious sometimes and kind of on the nose, but I can't decide yet if that's just because there have been 5,000 iterations of this material. And I'm unfairly kind of judging this based on that, because it didn't surprise me in that way. But it's such a minor quibble, considering just how enveloped I was by the worlds he's created here. Like, it's just so gorgeous to look at. So I still really enjoyed it.
All right, A minus. That's still a very high score. I'm also going to give it an A. And I think it did everything right. I had high expectations, and I came out sort of like blown away. I was like, there's just so many moments in this movie where I'm like, God, I fucking love movies. Like I can't spoil them, but they're just like big actors going big, directors who clearly have a very strong idea of the visual story they're trying to tell, the score that sets the mood, the creature, like there was so many times I was like, a scene with the carriage where you're just like, God, movies are so freaking cool. It does all those things right. Another thing I'll say is I suspect, knock on wood, I won't do it for the purposes of the mic, but knock on wood, I think this movie is going to hold up really well. I think because it's focusing It's a period version of the story. It's focusing on like sort of like modernizing the classic with modern film techniques. Also doesn't obviously rely on CG. I honestly don't know how much CG is in the movie. I'm sure there is some, but overall it's not obvious. So I think the effects are going to hold up really, really well. And Laron, to your point, because it's not really trying to reinvent the wheel with the script, I think that gives it sort of that classic feel. So if you're looking for a definitive version of a remake or reimagining, I think this is going to be the one we're looking to for quite some time.
And to your point about vibes, this is more of a mood piece, just kind of similar to the old one. You know, like it is very much about the atmosphere and the mood he's generating, and he does create this very oppressive, dark, ominous mood that is just very, very, again, entrancing, but kind of foreboding in the same way. So,
All right, so we all like it. All A's all around with 1A plus, 1A minus. Man, A's all around.
Hey, we're debating on levels of A. I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly. This is the best kind of review. Yeah, everyone should go see this movie. Well, mostly everyone should go see this movie. Maybe not kids under the age of 16.
Yeah.
What else would we recommend to go alongside Nosferatu? Movie, television show, novel, music, video game, what have you? And I'll throw it back around the table to you, Laron Chapman.
I am going to go with Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. I think that it's a very important piece of this particular character that I think people should watch. Shadow of the Vampire, 2000's Shadow of the Vampire, I really love.
Also with Willem Dafoe,
which kind of feels so perfect, like kind of a chef's kiss moment, like you're back in this universe, but in a different way. The 1932 Carl Dreyer film Vampire, I would recommend. That's the one that I saw in school that stood with me. And then, if you're looking for horny vampires, we did mention Paul Morrissey's in Blood for Dracula 1974 with Udo Kier as the main character. So yeah, that's one that I would recommend. I watched it recently with Craig. Also, if you haven't seen this, I mean, that and Flesh for Frankenstein are two in the same world, same director, very irreverent. But really a really fun time, both of them. So,
oh my goodness, I'm gonna fall. You know what I'm excited about? And Hyper First World Problems. I've been cramming a lot of movies. So this January, once we're done with our wrap ups, I'm gonna have a period of like a month where I can like watch all this random shit that you've been recommending to me for like a year.
Yeah.
And you just added another movie to the list. So,
I did.
My gosh, can't wait. Dustin Sells, what else would you recommend?
I'm going to recommend one thing because the one thing has a lot of things tied up into it. There's a writer called Grady Hendrix. You might know him from My Best Friend's Exorcism, the novel that was adapted into a not so great film. But it's a pretty fun novel to read. But he's kind of an expert in a lot of schlock and horror kind of stuff. He's got some great stuff on Kung Fu that I've used in a thing that I've been writing for a long time now. But he's got a podcast called The Super Scary Haunted Homeschool. And the first season is entirely dedicated to vampires and vampire lore all the way through. And it's really, really well researched, really, really well produced. And it's just a really great time. And he walks through the sort of the folklore developments, the sort of geographic variations of vampires, moving on into Stoker and those initial novel adaptations, cinematic adaptations. Talks about the 70s, moves into the Anne Rice moment, talks about the 80s and the sort of splatter gore versions of it. And it's probably the best encyclopedic entry that you can get on vampires in general, Dracula in particular. That's also hilarious and wildly entertaining throughout. Just an example, there's a moment where another voice comes in and goes, "Now it's time for the sidebar." And you sort of hear him still talking and he's sort of fading off while the sidebar goes for a while. And then he comes back and goes, "What are you guys doing over here?" And then they talk and he goes back into what he was doing before that. I mean, it's just really well produced and a lot of fun. So it's a super scary, let me say it right. The Super Scary Haunted Homeschool from Grady Hendrix.
I love
that. Love that.
I love a good scripted podcast, especially when it's well produced and you can say they put the energy into the production values. That sounds so much fun.
It's a good time.
All right, Broccoli, what would you recommend?
Just to throw it in your face, I'm just going to say Lost Boys.
Yes.
Oh, that's fair.
I'm kidding.
There's glitter in the blood, Caleb. You have to get on his wavelength.
I actually did a painting in high school called Death by Stereo because of that damn movie. So it always comes back to it. What I'm really going to recommend, and I kind of like this because we have movies, we have a podcast. I'm going to recommend a book. When thinking of just like the plague that he brings when he's coming, it reminded me of a book by Christopher Buehlman called Between Two Fires, which is about the plague. And there's no vampires, spoiler alert, but I do kind of like the plague that comes and what comes with it. And in it, it's all these types of monsters that, have come from hell that are just with the plague. And that's what it is. It's just the death of all of these people and just what comes with it. And it's about a fallen knight who meets this girl and realizes that she could end the plague and all of these things because of kind of what she encompasses. So it's pretty good.
That sounds great.
It is. It's really good.
Yeah, that sounds like a good time.
It is great.
I mean, insofar as the plague is a good time.
Minus the plague.
Yeah, it's like, this is a great time. Nosferatu, people die, rats kill people, a fun time.
If
But
you
no.
like history, it's a good time.
No, I love it. So I'll keep I do have a movie recommendation, but I'll keep the other multimedia going by recommending frankly, any of the games from the Castlevania video game series that are great.
yeah.
Specifically, this game's actually gonna be really hard to find, but the ones that I thought did the best job doing some really cool stuff with the lore and the story of the game was Castlevania Lords of Shadow, which is 2010, almost 15 years old now. So good luck finding that. Cool game. Patrick Stewart is one of the main voices in it. Very good. Voices Zorbeck, an elderly knight, and Belmont's mentor. So just to keep the multimedia thing going, I would also recommend, if you're looking for another sort of folklore vibes piece, go check out David Lowery's The Green Knight from 2021. Very different type of story. Not really a horror, but in terms of it being like almost like a mood piece at times, I thought there was a lot of overlap in terms of the attention to the time, the place, the feeling of the characters we're living in that film.
Lowery feels like a spiritual sibling to Eggers to me in a lot of ways. Yeah.
And I think I brought up The Green Knight after we watched Nosferatu, and I was okay on The Green Knight. And maybe I need to go back and revisit that one too, because when I first watched it, I was like,
Well, that was another one. There was a lot of expectations right on that one too.
I had a
The
lot.
bar was high for that one, and that was like still during COVID-ish times. So like people going to movies, it was like an even bigger deal. So there was some more mixed reactions on it. I do quite like it, and then I would just recommend any of Robert Eggers' movies. I mean, he only has 3 other ones. So again, those are The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman. I think all of them are great. Some of them are better than others, but I don't think you can go wrong. I think they're all winners. If you want to see 2 naked Vikings fighting to the death on an erupting volcano, The Northman has you covered. Okay, check it out. All right, well, with that said, we're going to move into a spoiler discussion for Nosferatu. So if you do not want to be spoiled on Nosferatu, tune out now.
Can I have a job application? I brought my own spatula. I called earlier, but I hung up because I was nervous. Do you have references?
Wait! If that was you on the phone and you on the bus, then who was flickering the lights?
Nosferatu!
Spoilers ahoy, so we can actually talk about the story proper here. So I want to elaborate on something that we talked about during the spoiler-free section, which is just how this kind of compares to other versions of the story. What does it bring to the table? More specifically, because we kind of talked around a lot of the story beats. So we have Bram Stoker's Dracula and/or Nosferatu, of course, has been adapted countless times in history. A few examples being, 1931's Dracula starring Bela Lugosi, the 1958 adaptation starring Christopher Lee, who also was in several other spin-off sequels.
Bunch of Hammer Draculas from Chris Lee,
So many in the 60s and 70s, maybe even the 80s. I don't know if he was doing it that long.
I think the last one's 74, something like that.
Lots of those. We also have, already mentioned, 1994's Bram Stoker's Dracula from Francis Ford Coppola, 2000 Shadow of a Vampire, or even, as Brock and I were talking about, Dracula 2000, which, by the way, there are multiple of those starring Gerard Butler as Dracula. So lots to choose from.
Well, Gerard's only in the first one.
Is he only the first one?
And then they recast for Dracula 2002 and 3.
Were those straight to DVD, probably?
My favorite.
I think they were straight to video. I'm not sure, but...
Yeah, probably. I think my favorite of a moment of Dracula 2000, when I said this, Caleb, they had vitamin C in it. And that just kills me still to this day.
A crucial role played by vitamin C.
Listen, if we all just took more vitamin C, this all could be averted.
Well, you see where she's at.
Yeah.
So, okay, what what is Robert Eggers bringing to the table with this version of the story that sets it apart from what's been done before? And maybe the answer is nothing. And if the answer is nothing, that's totally fine. I mean, we've talked about the mood and the production. What about the characters, the story, the specifics, I guess?
Well, I feel like with this one, I mean, he has so much to draw from, so much to pull from, so much history to draw from, so much to kind of fuse, pay homage to. And then he still has a way of making it his own. And also, like, he has the luxury of it not being censored. You know what I mean? There was a lot of these versions, like pre-code, for example, with Nosferatu, there's things you just couldn't do that he can do now, that is on full display here. So that's one thing I would note that I think is a little bit different, with his version with some of the others. So
Just go harder.
Just go harder. Like you said, just go harder with all the material, yeah.
What do you make, what did you think about we didn't even talk about Nicholas Hoult, by the way. I don't want to undersell it. Firstly, Nicholas Hoult also,
He's great.
He's great.
He's having a good year too.
He is having, dude, in the last 3 weeks, I think I've seen him in 4 movies, and he crushes all
Each
4
one,
yeah. movies. Yeah. Different podcast, but Juror Number 2.
Juror Number 2, yeah.
He was in what was that? With with the white supremacists and
exactly.
I'm totally drawing a blank on the movie. But yeah. It's great.
It's good.
It's good.
Is it the heist movie with Jude Law?
Yeah, Jude Law. And Jude Law plays the grisliest cop I've ever seen. He is so grizzled.
And his fellow X-Men, Taylor.
Yeah. That's gonna kill me. But yeah, anyway, Nicholas Hoult having a moment this year at the end of the year,
and his performance is so great. There's a moment where he's there in Castle Orlok, and he's just sort of listening to Orlok telling him what's up, and he's just shuddering with tears.
Yeah.
And doing all that performance with his face.
He can't even hide the fear. It's like, I can't even, I know I'm in the presence of something evil, and I want to get out of here as soon as I can. It's
incredible. Yeah, great performance. He needs to stay away from Dracula's. I mean,
that
poor guy's just having a bad time.
Which not to make you guys feel like this year was a million years long, but Renfield also this year, by the way.
Yeah. You're right.
Well, the thing that's interesting to me is there is a sort of POV shift because, by the way, sorry, the movie was called The Order.
Yes,
is quite good. Highly recommend. Check it out. Great performance from Nick Hoult as a cult leader. Really nice layout for the Lex Luthor role he's got coming up. But no, I think I found interesting, going back to Nosferatu, is the movie sort of positions him as the main character for the first half, and then there's a huge shift in the second half where it's really a lot more about Lily Rose Depp, which I often get frustrated when that happens because I kind of lose my sense of the story. But in this case, it makes it feel like the main, air quotes, character is the love triangle between the three of them. That becomes apparent as the movie goes along.
And that's a close reflection to the structure of the novel, to make that move there from, because it is sort of Jonathan Harker. I mean, again, and I do hate this about the movie. This is just, this is just one of those ongoing irritations with the adaptation and rights stuff that is part of the history of the movie. By the time Herzog gets a hold of it, he doesn't care anymore. It's Dracula, it's Harker, it's Dr. Whatever his name is Van Helsing.
Van Helsing, yeah.
Yeah, they're using all the names, and he's using all of the original names, so I get confused with that. But there's this just sort of brilliant use of this is our it's almost like a Janet Leigh rug pull from Psycho. You think this is your main character, and the rug pull, and it turns out it's going to be Mina, or in this case Ellen. That's the one who's going to do it, and I really just I love that about it, and I love the faithfulness to it, because a lot of times you'll see like the Lugosi adaptation, or you'll see some of the other Christopher Lee ones, and they're like, no, that rug pull just, it can't work, and I think it's courageous, filmmaking. So I dig it.
Yeah, and it makes it work. That's what's that's what's most impressive. Is you feel like you never lose the sight of the center of gravity in the story. When it's not Nicholas Hoult, Lily Rose Depp, it's Nicholas Hoult, Orlok, Bill Skarsgård, Orlok, and when it's not the two of them, it's Orlok, Lily Rose. You know what I mean? Like it does a great job at switching POVs without it losing the core, the heart of and the emotional arc you're supposed to be following throughout the film. At least not for me. I quite like that there's something inevitable that everything, especially in the second half, everything feels very inevitable. Okay, he escapes, great, but it is inevitable that she is going to have to die with him. I don't know, Brock, having not seen the original, like, did that come across to you where it feels like an inevitability that she's going to be the one who has to seduce him and sort of like put her life on the line for it?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, like the last half of it felt like, from him traveling, it felt a little abrupt to me, and I think that was where I was kind of like thrown off. And again, I could be off on that, but it just felt like a kind of an abrupt end to something. I was like, oh, that was, the climactic part. Not to riff on the horniness, Laron, I'm sorry, but like the part of it
it's
where
why I go to the movies, I guess.
where it comes, to fruition. I was like, oh, that was kind of. I felt like it was rushed, but then like having seen the original, you're like, okay, like I guess what I didn't get from him was how obsessed he was with Lily Rose Depp through the movie. Like I didn't feel that like he like had to have her type of thing. It just kind of felt like he was like, oh, there's this thing happened a long time ago. Then whenever they made that connection, and then she kind of pushed it away whenever she met Nicholas Hoult, and then all of a sudden it comes up again that whenever he travels, to his castle. So it all kind of felt like there could have been more played up to his connection with her. I don't know. That felt a little.
They set up in the cold open. I like the thing. I thought
cold open was fantastic.
Yeah, I thought that was sort of teased. But again, if you're not sure what you're watching the first time, I can see how that's like you kind of almost forget about it. The thing I think is interesting is seeing how Orlok is trying to manipulate him, and like he has him sign that contract he can't read, and then later is like he sold your marriage for this gold I gave him. It just like little things like that I thought were really clever. It sort of sets it up as like you think Willem Dafoe is going to do it, but Willem Dafoe I think is. Really, it's very apparent that he knows he can't stop him himself.
Yeah.
And he knows that what he wants is, to be with his bride or
He's kind of just facilitating. I mean, we're in spoilers now, right?
Yeah.
He's just facilitating it.
Yeah, he knows what's going on.
Yeah, he knows what's going on. Yeah.
And that's why he has to lure Hutter. He has to lure Hutter away.
Yeah.
Because he wants to keep him from interfering with what is the inevitable process of like, if she knows that she wants to take him down and he's going to need her to do that.
Yeah. And we know the foil here is that we know that he's not going to allow that to happen.
Right.
So we have to create some kind of a
distraction,
diversion,
wild
what have
goose
you.
chase.
Well, it's a different kind of tragedy than Eggers has done before. With the Northman, when he does that sort of Macbeth thing, or Hamlet. Hamlet's what he's doing in the Northman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's sort of that, the reason for the tragedy is the sort of fatal flaw of the protagonist is what brings that about, and that's sort of the Shakespearean rule there. This is a much more Greek kind of tragedy, the way and again Gothic tragedy to a lesser extent in terms of plotting, where it is simply that you are fated, that this is just destiny. This is what's going to happen. And there's really no fault or no blame sort of being laid to anybody. It's just that these forces are at work, and sometimes this is how they're going to come about. And the only choice you have is to fight or not, submit or run away. And she chooses to submit, and by submitting to fight, and so that makes it powerful and makes it tragic and sad.
Yeah. Because she, I mean, like it's pretty clear to her what she has to do, and you're just like, that's, and again, an inevitability that she's going to have to die in order for him to also not survive. Good stuff. Hey, let's talk a little bit. I did like an actor I did not mention earlier that I want to give a call out to is hold on, he plays the doctor, Ralph Ineson. I forgot to mention this in my ultimate recommendations. I was going to tell people to go play Final Fantasy 16 because he's a main character in that, and he's got a very distinct voice. Also going to play Galactus next. Love that he shows up as the doctor in this very eloquent role. He's the man of science. I like how he's like, so yeah, we tried everything my way, and there's this other guy. He was actually my professor. You see, he was the best at the university. So I'm gonna call him up, and Aaron Taylor Jones is like, well, yeah, get him here. He's like, no, you don't understand. He's already here. And he, he was the best, but he also got kicked out of the university for being a lunatic and getting obsessed with the.
He's your guy.
Supernatural. Yeah,
the occult.
The occult. I mean, I thought, and Brock, you mentioned this earlier, I really thought the movie, Willem Dafoe showed up at just the right moment. Not that the movie had to have that comedic relief, but it gave the the story, just enough levity and momentum to sort of push us through to the end. I mean, anytime he's going big, just the line deliveries.
Yeah.
That when they find the coffin and he lights it on fire, I literally couldn't help but chuckle. I was like,
or the crawl back into his mother's womb.
Oh my God!
I got a chuckle out of it.
He's like science. What did he say? It was oh shit! Who? Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton would crawl back into his mother's womb. It's just great lines. I mean, like, what did you guys think about his particular take here?
I really got a lot of Anthony Hopkins energy from Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I didn't think about that.
You know, but that sort of
there's a spunkiness.
There's a spunky tiltedness to that, and I really like that. And of course, I like the use of that particular role because it's one of the sort of Gothic tropes is to have the sort of irrational, rational, and understanding that the Enlightenment did not provide us enough answers. That reason, science, good, we should do that, but there's also more, and that you have to engage on this other register, you know, in order to face all that human beings face as we work through the world. So yeah, I like that. And his performance being, again, a little bit of Hopkins, but also just a little kooky I dug it a lot.
Your crazy uncle who's probably been on some drugs, but he knows his stuff.
But because he's seen things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he has, although there is the funny moment. He's like, so how much of this have you actually seen? He's like, I've never seen this before. I've just read about it.
It's all theory, man.
Again, I know you guys weren't as, and again, I hear what you're saying about Aaron Taylor Johnson. He is definitely not on quite the same wavelength as everyone else, but I did really chuckle that specific scene when he's like, all right, you got me. So how have you dealt with this before? And when he had his reaction, he's like, he's never seen this. Oh my God, get out of my house. It just was so funny.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I also want to dig into, I mean, like, this is a character that's been done a ton of times. And Dustin, I'll throw it to you here, and we can sort of like riff on this a little bit. I mean, what do you think makes the literary character so malleable based on, and you mentioned this earlier, it's sort of a story that feels like it's always sort of seeping ideas from what's going on in the culture at the time. What makes vampires and Dracula in particular so compelling?
I think it's because the edges are so ill-defined, because the folklore itself is sort of lost in history, and you've got, you know, Romanian specifics, and you've got Greek specifics, and you've got sort of northern forested Germany kind of ways in which this is encountered. There's even Russian versions of the vampires, which sometimes sound a lot more like werewolves. And which is fine. And because it is so ill-defined, the vampire itself, and that the Dracula lore itself is so sparsely drawn, that then when a filmmaker or storyteller says, okay, I'm really thinking a whole lot about fascism, so I want to sort of take it with this kind of approach. I'm really thinking a lot like Guillermo del Toro does with The Strain, right? Thinking about the war on terror.
Yep.
And so I want to take that and use some of the imagery, and there becomes a sort of repertoire of different things that people are familiar with that you can twist for a little bit of fun, that can sort of be a fan service. But on top of that, then it becomes this interesting cipher that can hold whatever it is that you want to put into it. And I think that's really where that durability comes from for me.
Very cool. Yeah.
And it's interesting with each interpretation of it, like which things they choose to hold true to and which things they choose to disregard altogether. Because even like, what is it like with Abigail earlier this year? I mean, there's like the garlic doesn't work. The crosses don't work, but sunlight, creates this blood, like this obnoxious. So it's like, and there's some comedic undertones about that. I think because Dracula is Nosferatu is very constantly relevant in terms of like because he represents kind of societal fears or repressed desires and those things are universal to the human condition. So I feel like that it's something that you can always, insert or apply what you want to here. And again, and mix things, like you said, kind of interchangeably with some of the lore if you want to. And it works. It works every time, it seems like, better in certain texts, but the overall, the character is, again, as you mentioned, just very malleable to so many different things that we experience as humans, our fear of death, our fear of, so things like that. But yeah.
And it can be like you said, like fascism or something like that. People have also used them just to pull certain demographics into horror, by changing not even like something that's political, but like if you think about like the 80s, and I'm not being funny now, but like with the Lost Boys, like kind of almost party culture, like even the tagline is like sleep all day, party all night, it's fun to be a vampire, just bringing in like that 80s fun. You think of the Twilight, how they kind of romanticized it and brought in like teen girls, like with vampires, you can twist it so many ways as to what their desire is, that it's not easy, but it's fun to frame a story around it to bring in different demographics of people to make them fans of that genre or of horror, and how they can do that.
Yeah, or I mean, even Blade bringing in sort of the like
techno
the,
culture.
yeah, I mean, like the leather, and parts probably like the African American culture to the fold.
We're getting another vampire movie this year, Sinners. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, right?
I don't know if you heard, they swapped the dates with that and Mickey 17. When they at the same time they pushed the Batman Part 2 back by another year.
But is it still this year?
Yes.
And I know it's not the same, but I told Caleb, I was like, this is, and I think I said it to you too. I was like, this is From Dusk to Dawn, but at like a hootenanny or something, at like a country jamboree
with Michael B. Jordan. I'm what's the oh God, how am I not?
Haley
Coogler.
Ryan Coogler directing.
It looks cool.
Different podcast. But
and I told Caleb, I was like, if there's no CG vampires, that's going to be the best.
Yeah.
I'm in. I feel
really confident.
Seeing Ryan Coogler do this story looks great. It's interesting that they're not marketing the vampires yet.
They're not.
It's weird.
No.
It's
They're
interesting.
really not.
Because the first iteration, the first thing I read about this is actually dealing with like the Confederacy.
Yes,
like
that's what I heard too.
They're killing like Confederate members or something like that. So I thought that was interesting.
But no, like watch the trailer. They're definitely gearing up to fight vampires. But you just they never say vampires. You don't see vampires. Sinners, ladies and gentlemen.
Which is what Abigail should have done. Okay.
Yes.
But carry on.
100%. Yeah. But yeah, I think you guys have all said it so well already. I think the idea, there's something that is intoxicating and compelling about we as humans are going to die, but what if we got embedded with this ancient evil? We could all of a sudden we wouldn't have to worry about the limitations of the human condition. I just have to feed off of the blood of other people, and I think using that as a vehicle for a lot of selfish desires enables a lot of different writers, as Dustin said, to bring their point of view to the story. And yeah, it's kind of cool because you see how folklore has proliferated our worldwide, our culture, our pop culture, and evolved and morphed, which is why I think it's super valuable that we got Nosferatu. It's like, that stuff's fine. Let's bring it back to the roots so we all remember kind of where this started. To kind of give it like another sort of like definite version of it. I'd say definite. There's gonna be another version probably in like 10 years that's also good, hopefully. But this is really bringing it together really well. So yeah, man, Sinners, vampires, they're so cool.
Excited.
So I want to wrap things up just by talking a little bit more about Robert Eggers as a director. Is he cinema's modern champion of folklore? Again, we've already mentioned he's only made 4 features, but he's quickly garnering a reputation as the guy who makes movies about popular folklore. And he's sort of carving in a niche. I think, Dustin, you already said it, like he's carving out his own lane, not quite the Guillermo del Toro lane, because I think del Toro leaned in a lot poppier. I mean, he did like Blade 2, he did Hellboy, He's doing this thing that no one else is doing at a level that very few have achieved with these types of stories. So I guess I want to just talk a little bit first about why it's good to have a guy who can do this at all, number one, and then we can talk more about directors. So I don't know, Laron, I'll throw it to you.
I think because history is important, and not just like human history, but cultural and artistic history. And I think as humans, we are kind of obsessed with the past and looking back, kind of trying to crack open the mystery of life and human behavior, kind of in an effort to evolve and learn from it. And I feel like with this particular text, like he's mentioned on the campaign tour for this, he's been doing a lot of press for this movie.
He has.
I've loved hearing him speak about how much he loves this particular text, and he said that he would never do, they're like, would you do a modern film? He was like, as soon as I see a cell phone in a movie, I check out of the movie. He was like, I have zero interest in depicting that part of the world. He's like, he just has a reverence for history, and he has a reverence for the past and kind of examining and reinterpreting that. So I think he's going to be a great a voice for this kind of what we're saying. You know, I think that this is definitely his calling, you know, as a filmmaker, is to be the person. Someone's got to do it. You know what I mean? Like, so it's nice that we have someone who does it so well. You know, so. But yeah, I think basically that we're interested in preserving the preservation of this kind of thing, and so I think it's always going to be necessary. Otherwise, we're just gonna get Marvel movies, and you know what I'm saying, or that. And I say that
you're gonna get derivatives of the derivative of the thing, at the best.
So it's nice to have someone who does have a reverence for the past, because otherwise we are just gonna get kind of soulless machine type. Part of the bigger machine movies, you know, that may be entertaining, but will not have any enduring legacy moving forward.
Yeah.
So
No, I feel you. Dustin, what's your take on, you know, as you teach this stuff. I mean, like folklore stories, keeping a version of these alive, like I don't want to say a very original, but like kind of grounding the more classic versions of these stories alive.
Yeah, I think really the value of Eggers and David Lowery and others who are doing this kind of work is because they introduce existing storytelling concepts, which is sort of what you were talking about with like the Marvel world, right? Those are intellectual properties and just new adaptations of things that people sort of already know and are familiar with. And of course, this movie is an adaptation of an existing, known, knowledgeable kind of thing. But what Brock said a little while ago, I think really has sort of turned my brain around a little bit here, because what Lowery does with The Green Knight, what this film does from Eggers, is it does sort of introduce the viewer to a rabbit hole. It is that the text itself is it's satiating. It satisfies, you know, your sort of viewer desire to watch a good movie, right? And you get good movie from what they're offering, but it also then sends you down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Then you want to go check out Nosferatu. You want to read Bram Stoker's Dracula novel. You want to sort of investigate these other things. You watch Green Knight. You're like, okay, now I need to read that Middle English poem and find out what's going on with that stuff, and maybe some other attempts at adapting that in other media. And so they do a thing that don't just point to themselves. And I think that's what separates it from a Marvel sort of IP adaptation, or, you know, just take your pick of your YA novel that, you know, makes its way to the screen. That might send you back to the source material, but it won't send you back into something else. You won't want to explore a different kind of thing. Like, you know what? I need to think about this. And this, you know, there's a moment in the movie where he recreates the Borgo Pass from the 1931 Bela Lugosi Dracula. And so you might go check that out. But like, you know what? I'm going to see these Universal horror movies. I'm going to see their Frankensteins and Brides of Frankensteins and Wolfsman and Creatures from the Black Lagoon and whatnot. That's what the movie sort of inspires you to get curious, and to sort of get off the beaten path, and to find what other monsters might be out there that might be worth paying attention to.
Absolutely.
Speaking of the Wolfman, that comes out on my birthday, so just know now that that's probably going to be the thing I invite everybody.
That's what we're doing.
The Wolfman.
So LaRon, you're saying this time I'm invited.
This time you will be invited.
Yes.
You will be invited this time.
I can't bring it. You know. I think at this point, Leigh Whannell might be bringing Universal. The Dark Universe still has a chance. It's not the same one that they advertised a few years ago, but
I have
thing
hopes.
to him.
What
Just
he
give
did
all
with
to
the
him.
Invisible Man was great. So
I know. If he can do it again with Wolfman, that's two. That's two. They just need a third one. Then they can start to market it.
We keep going.
The new trailer in front of Nosferatu for the Wolfman was it added a new little layer that I commented on to Caleb. We could talk after, but it was fantastic.
Yeah, very cool. So Brock, what do you think about this? Like in terms of, and I think your perspective here is very valid. Where you're like, well, I hadn't seen the original. I saw this one, not sure. But then I went back and watched the original. I was like, oh shit, that's what the movie's doing. Like, what's your take on like sort of preserving, remaking or retelling these stories?
Well, I mean, and one thing that Eggers brings to every film he's done is his historical accuracy. Like you don't feel like it was a movie made now, like, and they're trying to like think about what it would have been like back then. Like it almost feels like it was back then with, costume, with lighting, with how they do everything. And so I just think the passion that he brings to that and how smart he is and like how he portrays that on film, just kind of, it's easier to immerse yourself in the movie, just with the feeling that he brings to it. And I mean, and again, like you said, that rabbit hole, like when you listen to him speak about what he was inspired by paintings like the Death and the Maiden, or the Maiden and the Death, and just paintings like that. And it just opens up these new worlds for you to just go down. And then as you watch more movies from back then, or even in the future, you have just more references to harken back to that just, I don't know, make the experience all the better. So I think he's one of the directors and writers and somebody making movies that really just challenges you as a viewer to kind of dive in a little deeper, just because it's so interesting what he can do.
I think it's his passion and love for the history and the meticulous attention to detail.
Yeah,
that is so inspiring. That makes you, again, as you just mentioned, makes us want to get more content.
Let's not forget that the witch, the whole script was written as they spoke in that time period.
Which is
like
dialogue
it's insane.
is great.
Yeah.
Insane.
And we've name dropped this a couple times as this historical detail, but I just want to say out loud and just gush for a moment about the costumes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, are they not gorgeous?
incredible.
They're just all the way
And
through.
please give us some Oscar
Last
noms,
night
too.
I went down a thread just of it was a historian who went through the costumes, the mustache, like his coat, how it would have been from like not Vlad the Impaler, but someone of that in the Romanian army, and how like he had that along with Willem Dafoe, how his was actually an outfit that someone would have wore like 15 years prior that was not so much in fashion, but it's all he has left that he was holding on to as he was like a prestigious person. So it is, and it's just that, wow, it's that stuff that's like just really fun to just kind of unravel as you're going through it.
Because a lesser version of this movie wouldn't even consider details like that.
Yeah.
They wouldn't obsess about like including the reference to the Bela Lugosi Dracula. You know what I mean? Like it would just be like, oh yeah, here's a castle. Sure, he gets, the
obvious things.
Bram Stoker, cool as shit movie, super cool. But like upon viewing, I'm like, okay, like he's wearing purple glasses. Like I don't really want to go down a rabbit hole seeing if people wore purple glasses back then. I don't know, just like little things like that.
Right.
So it's just the accuracy of it.
Well, I think a thing I keep going back to, especially in the IPification of stories, and even to a certain extent, this is as well. I mean, Nosferatu is a known property technically, so I like that we have someone who is so committed to those details that there are people who see Marvel movies, like there's people who saw like Captain America or Winter Soldier who haven't seen any of the spy movies, the 70s spies movies that influenced it, right? They just know Captain America, Winter Soldier. And I don't think those movies do a great job at pointing, they don't feed the
You're not
curiosity.
gonna see 3 Days of the Condor. Yeah,
Exactly.
after watching that, yeah.
Even though the director, whoever they made them, they clearly watched those movies. Whereas when you get something like this, it is so focused on the details. It's in creating this world, as you said, Dustin. It gives people a point of reference when it's like, whenever I watch Blade, I'll remember that Blade's some derivative of a derivative of a derivative of a comic that is based on this creature over here. Now, all this is made up. Yes. However, to keep the detail, but to have a director who's so committed to bringing these details, that gives you it's not the original, but this is the closest to the original story, the best version I could make, is really valuable.
Yeah.
So people can understand the evolution of folklore and the evolution of stories and how they evolve and how we get Twilight, how we get Blade, how we get Daybreakers, another vampire movie I quite like. Like all this stuff is just riffs on riffs on riffs. What's the original? Well, this is not the original, but this is a meticulous, attention-crazed person, attention to detail crazed person. He committed to getting that story right so that there is like, hey, let's go study this movie so we can understand these movies. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I think we are about out of time. Is there anything else you'd like to add about Nosferatu before we wrap up today?
Watch the original first or after, either one.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I'd second that. Definitely go see this movie. Watch the original. And go watch Bram Stoker's Dracula. Watch Interview with the Vampire. Vampires are cool.
Always be watching vampires. Just always.
If you want to see a better version of Exorcism Believer, you can watch this one. And Lily Rose Depp, who is actually really good at convulsing and being possessed. That was creepy.
I have to say, I did text Laron after watching the movie, and I said, I didn't know people could move like that.
Yeah, you did. I didn't know what you meant. I had to wait till Christmas to see it. So I was like, man, yeah.
Well, listeners, check it out. And also when Sinners comes out. I don't even know if Sinners is going to be good. I have faith. But, just proactively give Ryan Coogler money because I want to keep making vampire movies.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, gentlemen, this has been so much fun. We are sitting here on a Sunday, the Sunday before the end of the year. I appreciate. Hope you guys have had a wonderful holiday season. Thank you for taking time out of your holiday season to come talk vampires with us. Laron, Chapman, where can people follow you and your work online?
They can continue to follow me on thecinematropolis.com with my film blog, Real Insights with Laron Chapman. I'm currently drafting a top 25, a couple movies I need to see before I finalize that list.
They just won't give us the freaking
one
Brutalist.
of them being The Brutalist. I can't really finish my list without seeing that mammoth of a movie.
I hate how they do that to us.
So, but other than that, yeah, I have a pretty sturdy list as of now. We'll see how it evolves.
All right, check it out, listeners. Cinematropolis.com. Real Insights with Laron. Also, you can follow him on Letterboxd. He's pretty good at Letterboxd.
That's also true.
Mm-hmm. Dustin Sells, where can people follow you online?
I mean, the best place to find me, obviously, is in your local podcatcher. Look for the Good Trash Genre Cast there, and I'm there every week talking about film studies type stuff with movies that don't belong in film studies courses. So if you want to think about Karl Marx and Gremlins, we do that. Sigmund Freud and Ghostbusters, we do that. That's the kind of people we are. We are twisted, deranged human beings, but we have a really good time there. If you're looking for the proper websites, goodtrashmedia.com. And I guess I'm also on Letterboxd, and I will endeavor to do better on posting on Letterboxd. I watch 350 movies every year, but it just the time, my friends.
Good Trash Genre Cast, great stuff. I learned something. Been part of the show at one point as a main member, recurring guest. I learned something every episode. Join Dustin, friend of the show, Dalton, Arthur, each week. Check it out. Brock Lay, where can people keep up with you online?
Brock Lay Design on Instagram and Behance.
All right.
Brock, man, thanks for coming, dude.
Always happy to be here.
Listeners, you can follow me on all the social media channels at Letter C Masters Talk, Letterboxd, Instagram. I am on Blue Sky. I keep saying that. I'm not super active there, but I do quite like the vibes. Mostly, find us at thecinematropolis.com. We had our biggest year at the Cinematropolis yet. Yay! So thank you for everyone who checked out the website, downloaded the podcast. We want to keep the momentum going. But anyway, just wanted to say it's been a great opportunity to continue talking movies for everyone who's tuning in with us. We'll catch you again next week when we talk about our 2025 preview.